On Mother's Day, my daughter-in-law screamed at me in front of 100 guests. "Get out of here and go fix lunch, you useless old woman." I just obeyed. As I was serving myself, she knocked my plate to the floor and made me clean it up. I had set aside $40,000 to give to her. Instead, I gave her an envelope with a photo that made her pass out. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and tell me which city you are watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." My name is Rebecca, and I'm 60 years old. I never thought that at this age I would be standing in the middle of the kitchen of my own home, cleaning food off the floor while 100 guests watched me from the open dining room door. The plate had shattered against the tiles with a crash that silenced all the conversations at the party. It had all started as a normal celebration. It was my son Daniel's 35th birthday, and like every year, Luna had insisted on throwing a huge party. Of course, I was the one who cooked, cleaned, and prepared everything while she strolled around like the perfect hostess, receiving compliments for an immaculate house and a delicious meal that she had never even touched. That morning, I had woken up at 5 a.m. to start the preparations. There was a roasted turkey, side dishes, and homemade desserts that I knew Daniel had loved since he was a boy. My arthritic hands ached after 3 hours of peeling potatoes and chopping vegetables, but I didn't care. It was for my son, for the family. Luna had appeared in the kitchen around noon, impeccably dressed in a white suit that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. She looked at me working by the stove and twisted her mouth into that expression of disgust that I knew so well. "Rebecca, I hope you didn't put too much salt in the meat like last time," she said without even greeting me. My friends are very used to good cooking. I swallowed and nodded. I had been living with them for 5 years since I was widowed and had learned that responding only made things worse. Daniel worked so much that he rarely saw these little interactions between Luna and me. For him, his wife was an angel who had generously agreed to have his mother live in their house. The guests started arriving at 2 in the afternoon. I stayed in the kitchen serving the dishes, while Luna greeted everyone in the living room. I could hear her crystalline laughter, her charming comments, the way everyone congratulated her on her wonderful hospitality. "Daniel is so lucky to have you," I heard our neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, say to her. "Not all wives would go to so much trouble to throw such an elegant party." Luna accepted the compliments with false modesty, knowing perfectly well that I was in the back, sweating over the hot stove while she shone in the spotlight. When it was finally time to eat, Luna came into the kitchen with that cold smile she reserved especially for me. "Rebecca, I want you to serve dinner," she said, but there was something different in her tone, something harder, more cruel. "And please, use the apron. We don't want the guests to think you're just another guest." My cheeks burned with shame. The apron was one thing, but the way she said it, as if I were a servant instead of the owner of the house where I had raised my son, cut me like a knife. I served plate after plate, carrying heavy trays that made my back ache. The guests ate and chatted lively while I went back and forth between the kitchen and the dining room. Some smiled politely, others just ignored me as if I were part of the furniture. When I was finally able to sit down with my own plate, Luna came up from behind. She had been drinking wine all afternoon, and her voice had that dangerous edge that appeared when she had too much. "What do you think you're doing?" she asked in a loud voice, loud enough that several guests turned to look. I'm eating," I mumbled, confused. "Eating here, with the guests?" Her voice rose another notch. "Rebecca, please, you know perfectly well that your place is in the kitchen." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the stares of everyone at the table. My heart started beating so hard I thought everyone could hear it. "Luna, I started, but she cut me off. "Get up," she yelled. "Go to the kitchen where you belong, you useless old woman." The words hit me like a physical slap. Useless old woman. In front of 100 people I had known for years, people from my church, neighbors, Daniel's friends, all of them looking at me with a mixture of shock and pity that made me want to disappear from the world. I got up slowly, my legs trembling. I didn't say anything because I couldn't. My throat was closed. My eyes burned with tears that I refused to shed in front of all of them. But Luna wasn't finished. As I passed her carrying my plate, she stuck out her foot. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, calculated, cruel. I tripped and my plate flew through the air, crashing onto the kitchen floor in an explosion of food and broken china. "Look what you did!" she screamed, acting as if it had been my fault. "Clean up that mess immediately!" I knelt on the cold floor, picking up the pieces of china with trembling hands. The food had spread everywhere. Mashed potatoes, gravy, chunks of turkey, all the work of my morning reduced to garbage on the floor. But as I cleaned, something changed inside of me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't explosive. It was quiet and cold like the ice that forms on windows during winter. As my knees ached against the tiles and Luna continued to yell orders at me from above, I made a decision. I had endured 5 years of this. 5 years of small and large humiliations. 5 years of being treated like an obstacle in the house where I had raised my son. 5 years of watching Luna manipulate Daniel, of seeing her spend his money, of seeing her turn my home into her personal kingdom. I finished cleaning in silence. The guests had returned to their conversations, though I could feel their occasional glances filled with pity. When I got up from the floor, Luna had returned to the living room, laughing as if nothing had happened. But I knew something had happened. Something had changed forever in that kitchen, among the broken pieces of china and the wasted food. That night, after all the guests had left and Luna had gone to bed, satisfied with her performance, I stayed awake in my small room. In my desk drawer was an envelope I had been saving for weeks, an envelope that contained $40,000 in cash, money I had saved for years to give to Luna as a gift. But now I had other plans for that money, plans that Luna would never see coming. The $40,000 had been my secret for 3 years. Every month when my Social Security check arrived, I set aside what I could. $20 here, $50 there, sometimes more when I managed to save on medicine, or when Daniel gave me extra money without Luna knowing. My plan had been to give that money to Luna for their upcoming wedding anniversary, thinking that maybe, just maybe, it would make her treat me better. How foolish I had been. The morning after the party, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. As I made coffee in the silent kitchen, I took the envelope from its hiding place behind the spice jars. $40,000 in $100 bills, carefully counted and saved. Money that Luna would never know existed. But there was another envelope too, a smaller one that I had been preparing in secret for the last 6 weeks. This one didn't contain money. It contained something much more valuable, the truth. It had all started 2 months ago when I went to the supermarket and saw Luna leaving a downtown hotel with a man who was definitely not my son. At first, I thought my eyes were deceiving me. I'm 60 years old after all, and my eyesight isn't what it used to be. But when I saw them hug and kiss passionately next to the man's red sports car, I knew I hadn't been wrong. Marcus Holloway. I recognized him immediately. He had been Daniel's best friend since college, his best man at the wedding, the man who had dinner at our table every Friday night, the man who hugged my son like a brother while sleeping with his wife in the afternoons. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake wondering what to do. Should I tell Daniel immediately? Confront Luna? But I knew my daughter-in-law well enough to know she would deny everything. She was a master of manipulation, an expert at making others doubt their own reality. So I decided to wait and watch and document. For the next few weeks, I started paying attention in a way I never had before. I noticed that Luna went shopping every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, always in a hurry, always getting too dressed up for simple errands. I noticed that Marcus visited our house more often when Daniel wasn't home, always with some excuse about dropping something off or picking something up. One afternoon, while Luna was in the shower after one of her shopping days, I checked her phone. I know it was wrong, but after years of humiliation, my conscience had developed some convenient cracks. The messages I found made me sick to my stomach. Not only did they confirm the affair, but they revealed that they had been laughing at Daniel behind his back. Luna had written to Marcus about how silly her husband was, how easy it was to manipulate him, and how he would never suspect anything because he trusted her too much. "He's like a little puppy," Luna had written. "He does everything I tell him and gives me everything I want. Meanwhile, you and I can have all the fun we want." Marcus's response was just as despicable. "Poor Daniel. He was always too good for his own good. At least his money is paying for these romantic getaways for us." I read those messages, trembling with rage. Not only were they betraying my son, but they were spending his money on their affair. Daniel worked 60 hours a week to support the lifestyle Luna demanded, and she was using that money to finance her infidelity. But there was more, much more. Following the messages backward, I discovered that the affair had been going on for more than 2 years. 2 full years of lies, of betrayal, of laughter at my son's expense. And worst of all, they had been planning to get a divorce once Luna could secure a good sum in the divorce settlement. "I just need a couple more years," Luna had written. "When I get divorced, I'll get to keep half of everything, the house, the savings, the investments. Then we can be together officially with enough money to live comfortably." Marcus had replied, "And what about old Rebecca? She'll be the first to go." "Daniel will keep her in some cheap nursing home somewhere," Luna had responded. "I'll finally have my house all to myself." A cheap nursing home. After having raised Daniel since he was a baby, after having taken care of the house for 5 years while they lived their perfect life, Luna had already decided my fate. A cheap place where I would be left to die slowly while she enjoyed the fortune my son had built. That night, with trembling hands, I started taking screenshots of everything. Every message, every photo, every sordid detail of their betrayal. I also started following them discreetly, documenting their encounters with photos taken from a distance. In 3 weeks, I had gathered enough evidence to destroy the perfect life Luna had built on lies. But I knew I had to be strategic. I couldn't just show everything to Daniel at once. Luna was too skilled at manipulating situations. I needed the perfect moment. The perfect moment came the morning after the party, when Luna came down for breakfast with that satisfied smile she had worn since the night before. "Good morning, Rebecca," she said with false sweetness. "I hope you learned your lesson from last night. We don't want any more embarrassing scenes, do we?" I stared at her as I made her coffee exactly the way she liked it. 2 spoonfuls of sugar, a splash of cream, just as I had done every morning for 5 years. "By the way," she continued, sitting down at the table and extending her perfectly manicured nails, "Marcus is coming over for lunch today. Daniel is at that big meeting until late, so make something special. You know how much Marcus appreciates a good home-cooked meal." The irony was so thick, I could almost cut it with a knife. Marcus coming for lunch at Daniel's table while my son was working to support the woman who was betraying them both. "Of course," I said quietly. "I'll make something very special." Luna smiled, satisfied with my apparent submission. She had no idea that in my desk drawer, next to the envelope with $40,000, there was another envelope. An envelope that contained a single photograph that would change her world forever. A photograph I had taken the week before when I had followed them to their favorite hotel. A clear, sharp, undeniable image. Luna and Marcus, in a position that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. But that photo was just the beginning. What Luna didn't know was that I also had evidence of something much worse. Something that would not only destroy her marriage, but could destroy her entire life. As I watched her drink her coffee, carefree and arrogant, I savored the moment. Very soon, that smile would be wiped from her face forever. The truth had begun to be revealed 3 weeks earlier when I hired Samuel Hayes, a private investigator who worked from a small office above the downtown bakery. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. The $500 I paid him was almost 2 months of my personal savings, but I knew I needed professional help. Samuel was a man in his 50s, discreet and efficient. When I showed him the first photos I had taken of Luna and Marcus, he nodded with the expression of someone who had seen this story too many times before. "Mrs. Collins," he had said, I understand your situation, but you need to know that this goes deeper than you think." I didn't understand what he meant until he came back a week later with a file that changed everything I thought I knew about Luna. My daughter-in-law's real name wasn't Luna Miller, as she had told us when she married Daniel. Her real name was Carmen Valdez, and she had a past that she had carefully hidden for 7 years of marriage. "Your daughter-in-law was arrested in Nevada 10 years ago for marital fraud," Samuel explained, showing me official documents. "She married 3 different men in a 2-year period, emptying their bank accounts before disappearing." My hands trembled as I read the police reports. There were photos of Luna, younger, but unmistakably her, along with her aliases: Carmen Valdez, Sofia Martinez, Isabella Rodriguez. Each identity had been carefully crafted to trap successful, lonely men. "How is that possible?" I whispered. "Daniel ran a background check on her before they got married. He's very careful about these things." Samuel smiled sadly. "Your daughter-in-law is a professional, ma'am. The documents your son saw were forged. Birth certificates, university degrees, employment references, all fabricated by a network that specializes in creating clean identities for con artists." The file contained much more. Luna had been legally married to a man named Robert Sanchez in Las Vegas when she married Daniel. Technically, her marriage to my son was null and void, but there was something even worse. "There's more," Samuel continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Your daughter-in-law didn't work alone in Nevada. Her main accomplice was a man named Marcus Holloway." My world stopped. Marcus, Daniel's best friend, his best man at the wedding, the man who had been having dinner at our table for 7 years while planning to destroy my son from the inside. "Marcus and Carmen worked together to scam 3 different victims," Samuel explained. "The pattern was always the same. She would marry the target. He would become a close friend to gain their trust, and together they would empty the accounts before disappearing." "Why didn't they disappear after scamming Daniel?" I asked, although part of me already knew the answer. "Because Daniel turned out to be more valuable than they expected," Samuel replied. "Your son built a considerable fortune during these years. Instead of stealing a fixed amount and running, they decided to stay and milk the cash cow for as long as possible." He showed me more documents, bank records that showed regular transfers from Daniel's accounts to offshore accounts controlled by Luna and Marcus. For 7 years, they had been systematically stealing small amounts that Daniel would never notice, $500 here, $1,000 there. "In total," Samuel said, "we estimate they've stolen approximately $250,000 during the marriage, $250,000, $250,000. The money Daniel had worked so hard to earn, money he thought was securing his family's future, had been flowing directly into the accounts of his 2 closest predators. But the worst was yet to come. "There's something else, Mrs. Collins," Samuel said, hesitating for the first time. "Something I found in my investigations into Carmen's past." He handed me a separate folder. Inside were newspaper clippings from 12 years ago from a small town in Arizona. The headline chilled me to the bone: "Young woman disappears after confronting scammers." The victim was named Elena Vasquez, a 26-year-old teacher who had discovered that her fiancé was scamming her along with his best friend. Elena had threatened to go to the police. 3 days later, she disappeared. Her body was never found. "Are you suggesting that Luna—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm not suggesting anything," Samuel said carefully. "But Carmen Valdez and Marcus Holloway were in Arizona at that time using other names, and Elena Vasquez had discovered their scheme exactly as you did." I felt the air escape from my lungs. Not only was Luna a professional con artist, but she was potentially something much worse, and I was living under the same roof as her, knowing her secrets. "What do you recommend I do?" I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. Samuel closed the folder slowly. "Be very, very careful, Mrs. Collins. People like Carmen don't hesitate to do whatever is necessary to protect their secrets if she suspects you know something." He didn't need to finish the sentence. I understood perfectly. That night, I returned home with the file hidden in my shopping bag. Luna was in the living room watching television, laughing at some romantic comedy. She seemed so normal, so innocent. But now when I looked at her, I saw the predator she really was. "How was your day, Rebecca?" she asked, without turning to look at me. "I hope you didn't spend too much money at the supermarket. You know Daniel worries about expenses." The irony was nauseating. Luna, who had stolen $250,000, was scolding me for spending money on food. "It was a normal day," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Nothing special." But as I went up to my room, I knew that everything had changed. On my desk, next to the envelope with $40,000 and the photograph of Luna with Marcus, I now had something much more powerful: the complete evidence of who Carmen Valdez really was. Daniel would be home in 2 hours. Luna would be waiting for him with her perfect smile and her Judas kisses. Marcus would come to dinner on Friday as always, playing the role of the loyal best friend. But this time, it would be different. This time, I would have the opportunity to expose the two predators who had been preying on my family for years. I just had to find the perfect moment. And that moment came sooner than I expected. The next day, Luna announced that she wanted to host a special dinner to celebrate Daniel's promotion at work. "An intimate dinner," she said. "Just for close family and a few special friends. I'll invite Marcus, of course," she said casually. "And maybe a few of my friends from the club. It'll be a perfect night." As I listened to her plan her next performance, I smiled for the first time in weeks. Luna was right about one thing: it would be a perfect night, but not in the way she expected. The envelope with the photograph of her and Marcus was still waiting in my drawer, but now I knew that a simple photo of infidelity wouldn't be enough. I had evidence of something much more devastating, and when the right moment came, I would hand it all over. The special dinner was scheduled for Saturday night. Luna had spent the entire week organizing every detail with the precision of a general preparing for battle. She invited 12 people: Marcus, of course, a few friends from her tennis club, 2 neighboring couples, and Daniel's business partners, who she considered important for his career. As always, I was invisible in her plans, except as the unofficial cook. For 3 days, she had me preparing appetizers, testing recipes, and making sure everything was perfect for her big night. "Rebecca, I want this night to be flawless," she told me Friday morning as she reviewed the guest list for the 10th time. "Daniel deserves to have his success celebrated properly." Daniel's success. The irony ached in my chest. My son had worked 16-hour days for months to get that promotion, sacrificing time with friends, hobbies, even me, and all to give Luna the lifestyle she demanded, without knowing that she had been systematically robbing him for 7 years. That afternoon, while Luna was out for her weekly spa treatment, which I now knew was her time with Marcus, I called Samuel Hayes. "Are you sure you want to do this tonight?" he asked me. "Once you open that Pandora's box, you can't close it." "I'm sure," I replied, surprised at the firmness in my own voice. "My son deserves to know the truth." "All right. I sent you all the additional documentation you requested by mail. It should arrive this afternoon. And Mrs. Collins, be careful. Carmen is unpredictable when she feels cornered." The package arrived at 4 p.m. Inside were certified copies of everything: the police reports from Nevada, the marriage records that showed Luna was still legally married to Robert Sanchez, the bank records of the transfers, and even information about Elena Vasquez and her disappearance. There was also something I hadn't expected: photos of Luna and Marcus taken that very afternoon at the downtown hotel. Samuel had followed my request to get fresh evidence they couldn't deny or explain. As I organized all the documents in chronological order, I felt a strange calm take over me. After years of feeling powerless, I finally had control over something. The truth was my weapon, and it was as sharp as a razor. The guests started arriving at 7. Luna was radiant in a blue dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She greeted each person with effusive hugs and that musical laugh she used when she wanted to impress. Daniel came home from work just in time, still in his suit, visibly tired, but smiling because of the effort Luna had made to celebrate him. My heart broke to see the genuine gratitude in his eyes when he kissed her on the cheek. "Thank you for organizing all this, honey," he said. "I know how much work it took you." "Anything for you, my love," Luna replied, with that sweet voice she had perfected over years of deception. Marcus was the last to arrive, of course. He came in with that confident smile he had cultivated over years of betrayal, hugging Daniel like the brother he pretended to be. "Congratulations, brother," he shouted, patting him on the back with false enthusiasm. "You totally deserve it." "You deserve it," I thought bitterly. "You deserve to know that your best friend has been betraying you for years." The dinner went on like all of Luna's dinners, perfectly choreographed, full of superficial conversations and forced laughter. I served each dish in silence, invisible as always, watching the performance from the shadows. During dessert, Luna stood up with her wine glass in hand. "I want to make a toast," she announced, her voice projecting throughout the dining room. "To my wonderful husband Daniel, who worked so hard to give us this beautiful life, and to our dear friends, especially Marcus, who has been like a brother to us all these years." Everyone raised their glasses. Marcus smiled and winked at Luna in a way that only I noticed. Daniel beamed with pride, completely unaware that he was toasting his own betrayal. "And of course," Luna continued, her gaze finding mine from the kitchen, "to family, to those who understand their place and their role in our lives." That was the last straw, her place and her role. As if I were an employee instead of the mother who had raised the man who was supporting her. I slowly took off my apron and walked into the dining room. Everyone looked at me in surprise. I never interrupted Luna's dinners. "Luna," I said, my voice calm but clear, "I think there's something you should see." Her smile faltered for a moment. "Rebecca, we're in the middle of a celebration. Whatever it is can wait." I didn't respond, taking the envelope from my apron. "This can't wait." The silence in the dining room was palpable. Daniel looked at me, confused, while Marcus had noticeably paled. "What is that?" Luna asked, but there was something in her voice that suggested she already knew. "It's a gift," I said, extending the envelope to her, "similar to the one I had planned to give you. $40,000 I had saved for years, thinking that maybe it would earn me your respect." Luna blinked, clearly disoriented by the change in my behavior. "But after Daniel's birthday party last week," I continued, "I decided you deserved something different, something more appropriate." With trembling hands, Luna took the envelope. The room was so quiet that I could hear the paper crinkling as she opened it. The first thing she saw was the photograph, the clear, sharp, undeniable image of her and Marcus in a compromising position outside the downtown hotel. Taken just hours earlier, the color completely drained from her face. Her legs wobbled, and for a moment I thought she was going to fall. What is this?" she whispered, although we both knew exactly what it was. "Keep looking," I said calmly. "There's more." With trembling fingers, Luna pulled out the next document, a certified copy of the marriage record between Carmen Valdez and Robert Sanchez, dated 2 years before her wedding to Daniel. Marcus had gotten up from his chair, his face a mask of panic. Daniel was looking between the photo and his wife, trying to process what he was seeing. "Luna," Daniel said, his voice barely a whisper. "What is this?" But Luna didn't answer. She was staring at the third document, the police report from Nevada that identified her as Carmen Valdez, wanted for marital fraud. It was then that she collapsed. It wasn't an elegant faint like in the movies. It was a complete, total, devastating collapse. Her body folded in on itself as if she had received a physical blow, and she fell to her knees on the dining room floor. The guests jumped back, some of them gasping. Marcus ran toward her, but he stopped when Daniel looked at him with an expression I had never seen on my son before. "Don't you dare touch her," Daniel said. His voice was dangerously low. "Don't you dare touch my wife." "Daniel, brother, I can explain," Marcus began. "Explain what?" Daniel held up the photo with trembling hands. Explain why my best friend is sleeping with my wife. Explain why my wife apparently has another name and another husband. Luna was sobbing on the floor, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of panic from a woman who knew that her carefully constructed world had just collapsed. "There are more documents in the envelope," I said softly, addressing Daniel. "Much more." Daniel dumped the contents of the envelope onto the dining room table. Bank records, additional photographs, police reports, all scattered in front of the guests who had come to celebrate his success. The silence that followed was absolute. 12 people stared at the evidence of a betrayal so complete, so devastating, that no one knew what to say. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice broken but firm. "I want everyone to leave now." The guests didn't need to be told twice. They got up and left in silence. Some mumbled apologies, others simply fled from the discomfort. Marcus was the last to move. He approached Daniel with his hands outstretched, pleading, "Daniel, please, let me explain. Things got complicated, but we never wanted to hurt you." My son looked at him with a coldness that surprised me. "Get out of my house," he said quietly, "and if I ever see you near my family again, I'm calling the police." Marcus looked at Luna, who was still sobbing on the floor, then at me. His eyes met mine, and I saw something there that chilled my blood. It wasn't remorse, it was a threat. After Marcus left, Daniel knelt beside Luna, not to comfort her, but to speak. "How much of this is true?" he asked. Luna raised her head, and for the first time in 7 years, I saw her true face, without the mask of the perfect wife, without the act of the grateful daughter-in-law. It was the face of Carmen Valdez, the professional scammer. "Everything," she whispered, "everything is true." And with those 3 words, my son's marriage came to an end. The days that followed the dinner were like watching a building crumble in slow motion. Luna, or Carmen as we now knew her real name was, didn't get up from the dining room floor for almost an hour after the guests left. She stayed there, sobbing, trembling, occasionally mumbling incoherently about how everything had gone wrong. Daniel had sat in his chair, staring at the documents scattered on the table. He hadn't screamed or erupted in fury as I had expected. Instead, there was a stillness in him that scared me more than any angry outburst. "Mom," he finally said, his voice barely audible, "how long have you known about this?" The question went through me like an arrow. 6 weeks, I admitted. "I started to suspect 2 months ago, but I didn't have proof until 6 weeks ago." He nodded slowly, as if he were processing every word. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I knew she would find a way to make you doubt me," I replied honestly, "and because I needed to be completely sure." That night, Daniel stayed up until 4 a.m., reading every document, verifying every detail. Carmen had gone up to the master bedroom and hadn't come out since. I could hear her occasional cries through the walls, but they no longer sounded like remorse. They sounded like self-pity. The next day, Daniel hired a lawyer. Margaret Thompson was a severe woman in her 60s, specializing in complicated divorces and marital fraud. When Daniel showed her all the evidence that Samuel had gathered, her eyes lit up with the satisfaction of a predator who had found easy prey. "This is more than enough," she told Daniel during their first meeting. "The marriage is null and void due to bigamy. She isn't entitled to any marital property. In fact, we could sue her for the $250,000 she stole." But Daniel was too good for his own good, even after everything he had discovered. "I just want her to leave," he told me that night. "I want her to disappear from our lives forever." Carmen had been locked in the room for 3 days when she finally came down. She looked terrible. Her eyes were swollen, her hair was a mess, and she was wearing the same clothes as the night of the dinner. But when she saw me in the kitchen, something in her eyes changed. Desperation transformed into something more dangerous. "This is your fault," she told me. Her voice was hoarse from crying so much. "You destroyed my life." I turned slowly to face her. I didn't destroy anything, Carmen. You built your life on lies, and lies always eventually collapse. Her face contorted with fury. My name is Luna. I'm Luna Miller Collins. I've been a part of this family for 7 years. Your name is Carmen Valdez, I replied calmly. And you were never a part of this family. You were a parasite feeding off it. That's when she attacked me. She lunged at me with her nails out, screaming obscenities. For a moment I feared for my life. But Daniel appeared in the kitchen just in time, grabbing her by the arms and holding her away from me. Let go of me! Carmen screamed. This old witch ruined everything I worked for. What you worked for, Daniel said, his voice as cold as ice, was to steal my life. That was the first time I had ever seen my son truly angry. Not explosive rage, but something deeper and more controlled. Carmen must have seen something in his eyes too, because she stopped fighting and collapsed against him, sobbing. Daniel, please, she pleaded. I know I made mistakes, but I love you. I really love you. We can get through this. Daniel pushed her away from him as if she were something dirty. You don't know what love is, Carmen. You only know how to manipulate it. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal activity. Margaret Thompson had started the annulment process, frozen the joint bank accounts, and filed a civil lawsuit for the stolen funds. Carmen had hired her own lawyer, a nervous man who had clearly realized that he had an impossible case to win, but Carmen had one last ace up her sleeve. A week after the confrontation in the kitchen, the police arrived, 2 serious officers who asked to speak with me about certain accusations. Carmen had filed a complaint alleging that I had been harassing her, threatening her, and that I had falsified evidence against her. She claimed that the photographs had been digitally manipulated and that the documents about her past were malicious fabrications. She's a bitter old woman who never accepted me, the detective told me. She's trying to destroy my marriage because she's jealous of my relationship with her son. Fortunately, Samuel Hayes had anticipated this possibility. He had certified copies of all the documents, testimonies from the sources in Nevada, and forensic evidence that the photographs had not been altered. The police investigation lasted exactly 3 days before they dismissed Carmen's accusations as false. But the damage to her credibility was devastating. Her own lawyer resigned after discovering that she had also lied to him about several aspects of her case. That's when Marcus reappeared. He had been in hiding for 2 weeks, probably waiting for everything to calm down. But when he realized that Carmen was losing, he decided to save his own skin. He showed up at Margaret Thompson's office with his own lawyer, offering to testify against Carmen in exchange for immunity. He had detailed records of all the financial transfers, copies of text messages, and evidence of other schemes they had been running together. Marcus Holloway was smart, Margaret explained to me after the meeting. He realized that Carmen would sink him with her if he didn't act first. His testimony seals the case completely. Carmen found out about Marcus's betrayal that same afternoon. Her reaction was spectacular, even by her standards. She showed up at the house screaming, breaking things, and threatening to tell the truth about everyone. Marcus and I were a team, she screamed, as Daniel called the police. If I go down, he's coming with me, and so are you, Daniel. You're all going to pay. But her threats were empty. Without Marcus as an ally, without money for decent lawyers, and with all the evidence against her, Carmen had no power to hurt anyone else. The police arrested her that night for violating a restraining order that Daniel had obtained days earlier. She spent 3 days in jail before she could post bail. When she came out, she had changed. She was no longer the furious, desperate woman from before. She was something more dangerous, a woman who had accepted that she had lost everything, and who now only wanted to cause the most damage possible. This isn't over, she told me when she came to pick up her things under police supervision. You may have won this battle, Rebecca, but I know things about this family that could destroy you all. I looked her directly in the eyes. You no longer have power here, Carmen. You can no longer hurt my family. She smiled, but there was no joy in that expression. We'll see. 3 days later, Carmen Valdez disappeared. She packed her most valuable belongings overnight and simply vanished. She didn't leave a forwarding address. She didn't say where she was going. One day, she was there. The next, she had disappeared as if she had never existed. Daniel found a note in the master bedroom. "This isn't over. I'll be back when you least expect it." But I knew she wouldn't come back. Carmen was a predator, and predators always look for easy prey. Daniel was no longer easy prey. He was no longer the naive man he had been when she met him. Marcus didn't stay either. After testifying against Carmen, he sold his house and moved to another state. He had lost not only his accomplice, but also the best friend he had betrayed for years. For the first time in 7 years, the house was at peace. There was no more tension, no more walking on eggshells, no more pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Daniel had lost a wife and a best friend, but he had gained something more valuable: the truth. And after living in lies for so long, the truth felt like freedom. But I knew that the real healing was just beginning. 6 months after Carmen disappeared, Daniel and I were sitting in the backyard, enjoying morning coffee in a comfortable silence we hadn't shared in years. The lawn was green and well kept. The flowers I had planted were blooming without the constant tension that had dominated the house for so long. "Mom," Daniel finally said, breaking the silence, "I never properly thanked you for what you did." I put my cup on the saucer and looked at him. My son had changed during these months. The stress lines around his eyes had softened. He had gained back weight that I hadn't realized he had lost, and for the first time in years, he seemed truly at peace. "You don't need to thank me for protecting my family," I said. "But I do need to apologize," he continued, his voice filled with emotion. "For 7 years, I let Carmen treat you horribly. I saw you serve, clean, and endure her humiliations, and I did nothing to stop her." I felt a lump in my throat. "Were you in love, Daniel? Or did you just think you were?" "No," he said firmly. "That's no excuse. You're my mother. You raised me alone after Dad died. You worked 2 jobs to put me through college. You sacrificed everything for me, and I let a stranger treat you like you were invisible in your own home." Tears began to roll down my cheeks. We had had many conversations during these months, but this was the first time Daniel had truly confronted his role in everything that had happened. "For years I wondered, why didn't you stand up for me?" I admitted. "Why didn't you ever see what Carmen was doing to me? I even came to think there was something wrong with me." Daniel closed his eyes, the pain evident on his face. "My God, Mom. Carmen was very skilled at manipulating me. Every time I noticed something, she had an explanation. She said you were difficult, that you were jealous of our relationship, that you needed boundaries because you were too demanding. And you believed her?" "I wanted to believe her," he admitted. "It was easier to believe that the problem was you than to face the possibility that my perfect wife was a liar." We remained in silence for a few minutes, processing years of pain and misunderstanding. "Do you know what hurt me the most?" I finally asked him. Daniel shook his head. "That after all I sacrificed for you, after all the years I cared for you and loved you unconditionally, you chose to believe a woman you had only known for a few years instead of trusting the mother who had been there your whole life." Daniel got up from his chair and knelt beside mine, taking my hands in his. "You're right," he said, his voice breaking, "and there's no excuse for that. But I want you to know that I will never, ever again let anyone treat you that way, and I will never again doubt you when you tell me something is wrong." I hugged him then, feeling as if I was getting my son back after years of having lost him to a stranger. The following weeks brought more revelations. Margaret Thompson had managed to recover $80,000 of the funds that Carmen and Marcus had stolen. It wasn't everything, but it was significant. Daniel used some of that money to remodel the house, removing all traces of Carmen's reign. "I want this to be your house again, Mom," he told me as the workers tore down the wallpaper Carmen had chosen. "I want you to feel welcome here again." He also insisted on giving me the $40,000 I had saved for Carmen. "That money is yours," he told me when I protested. "You saved it from your own Social Security, and I want you to use it for yourself. Trips, hobbies, whatever makes you happy." For the first time in decades, I had money that was completely mine. Not for the family, not for emergencies, but just for me. I decided to use it for things that Carmen had never allowed. I redecorated my room, bought books, and even enrolled in painting classes at the community center. The biggest transformation, however, was in Daniel himself. Without Carmen constantly manipulating him, my son began to rediscover who he really was. He started cooking again, something he had loved, but that Carmen had constantly criticized. He renewed his passion for photography. He even started hanging out with friends that Carmen had subtly pushed away over the years. "I feel like I'm waking up from a very long dream," he told me one night, "a dream where I wasn't myself." But the true test of our healing came when Daniel started dating someone new. Sarah was a 42-year-old nurse, divorced with 2 teenage children. She was the opposite of Carmen in every way, practical instead of glamorous, honest instead of manipulative, genuinely kind instead of charming in a calculated way. The first time Daniel asked me what I thought of her, my heart stopped. For years I had learned to keep my opinions to myself, to smile and nod no matter what I really felt. "I want your honest opinion, Mom," he said. "If there's anything you don't like about Sarah, I need to know. I'm never going to ignore your gut feeling about people again." "I like her," I said, and it was completely true. "She's genuine. She's not trying to impress you, and most importantly, she treats you with real respect, not that fake admiration that Carmen used to manipulate you." Daniel smiled. "That's exactly what I thought." Sarah started coming over for Sunday dinners, sometimes bringing her children. It was wonderful to have kids in the house again, filling the spaces that had been silent for so long. And Sarah always insisted on helping with the cooking, treating me as an equal instead of an invisible servant. "Mrs. Collins," she said to me one afternoon as we washed dishes together, "Daniel told me what happened with his ex-wife. I want you to know that I completely respect the place you have in his life. This is your house, your family. I'm just a guest." I felt tears well up in my eyes. "Call me Rebecca," I said, "and you're not a guest. If Daniel is happy with you, then you're welcome here." A year after Carmen's disappearance, we received news of her for the last time. She had been arrested in Florida under another name, accused of scamming an 80-year-old man. Apparently, she had gone back to her old tricks, but this time she had chosen the wrong victim, a retired detective who had seen through her lies immediately. "Do you feel anything for her?" Daniel asked me when we saw the news. I thought about it for a moment. "Pity," I finally admitted. "Pity for someone who never learned that real relationships based on true love are worth more than anything you can steal or manipulate." Daniel nodded. "I feel the same way. And relief that she's so far away from us." Marcus had also been arrested in Nevada on charges related to his past scams. Apparently, his testimony against Carmen hadn't been enough to protect him from his own crimes. The last I heard of him, he was serving a 5-year prison sentence. During the second year after Carmen's departure, Daniel and Sarah got engaged. This time, Daniel asked for my blessing before proposing. "Are you sure it's the right thing?" I asked him. Not because I doubted Sarah, but because I wanted to be sure that Daniel was making the decision for the right reasons. "I'm sure," he told me, "but this time I'm going to do things differently. No big ceremonies, no trying to impress anyone, just close family, people who truly love us." Daniel and Sarah's wedding was everything his first wedding hadn't been: intimate, heartfelt, and full of real love instead of spectacle. They asked me to walk down the aisle with Daniel, officially acknowledging the role I had in his life. "You're the most important woman in my life," he said as we walked, "and I want Sarah and everyone else to know it." Now, 3 years after it all started, I'm sitting in the same backyard where Daniel and I had that crucial conversation. But now I'm not alone. Sarah is next to me, showing me how to use a tablet to look at pictures of her kids in college. Daniel is in the kitchen preparing lunch for all of us, singing softly as he cooks. The house is full of real life again. Not the fake, perfect life that Carmen had created, but the messy, imperfect, but genuinely happy life of a real family. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had never found the courage to expose Carmen, if I had remained silent, enduring her humiliations, watching my son be manipulated and robbed without doing anything. But it no longer matters. I made the right decision at the right time. I protected my family the way I knew how, with patience, with evidence, and with the truth. And now, for the first time in years, we are all exactly where we belong. Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.